There are moments in history that make the whole world pause. Moments when a single voice, steady, clear, and unshaken, cuts through the noise, and suddenly everything changes. I want you to imagine this: a room filled with the most powerful leaders on the planet, every conversation buzzing with tension, agendas clashing, eyes scanning, waiting for the next move. And then in less than 60 seconds, one man spoke, and the entire room fell silent. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to, because true power doesn't shout. True power simply arrives, speaks its truth, and lets the world feel it. That man was Jaishankar. And in that brief, unforgettable moment, he didn't just represent a nation, he redefined how the world saw it. The world had been used to seeing India explain itself, defend itself, politely justify its every move. But in that single 60-second speech, the script flipped. He didn't explain, he didn't defend, he declared. And for the first time, people realized India wasn't asking for a seat at the table anymore. It already owned its space. I want you to feel that moment, because it was more than politics. It was a lesson in life. We've all been in rooms where our voice felt small. We've all had moments where the world doubted us, ignored us, underestimated us. And sometimes we think that to be heard, we have to be loud. We have to argue. We have to fight for people to see our worth. But what Jaishankar showed the world that day is this: you don't have to raise your volume to raise your value. Power is not in the noise, it's in the truth you carry, the calm you hold, and the courage to stand firm when the world is watching. In just 1 minute, he spoke with a clarity that left critics silent, allies inspired, and the media scrambling for words. Headlines flashed across the globe, not because he was dramatic, but because he was undeniable. And isn't that the kind of presence we all want in our lives? Think about it. How often do you give away your power by over-explaining yourself? How many times do you let the world's doubt make you louder instead of stronger? Jaishankar's 60-second moment wasn't just about a country. It was about a principle that every single one of us can carry. Calm is power. Presence is power. Truth is power. That day, India didn't ask for respect. It commanded it. And that's what I want for you. Because maybe right now, someone is underestimating you. Maybe the world hasn't yet seen the strength you hold. Maybe you've been living your life trying to prove yourself, explain yourself, defend your dreams to people who were never meant to understand them. But here's the secret that speech taught us. Respect doesn't come from fighting to be seen. It comes from knowing who you are so fully, so clearly, that when you speak, the world has no choice but to listen. So as you hear this story unfold, I want you to remember, it's not just about a room full of diplomats. It's not just about global politics or headlines. It's about that moment in your own life when you decide that your voice will carry, not because it's the loudest, but because it's the truest. In 60 seconds, Jaishankar showed us that confidence is quiet, influence doesn't need to scream, and the world will always remember the one who speaks with unshakable calm. Because when your truth is undeniable, silence falls, and the world listens. Power is not always in the noise. Sometimes the loudest voice in the room is the one that never needs to shout. I want you to imagine a moment where everything is moving fast, people talking over each other, opinions clashing, energy buzzing, tension thick in the air. That's what the global stage feels like most of the time. A constant hum of demands, accusations, defenses. Everyone is fighting to be heard. And then there's that one voice. Quiet, measured, steady. A voice that doesn't rise with the chaos. It simply speaks. And suddenly, everything stops. That is the power of silence and precision. It's the power to shift a room without forcing it. And that is exactly what we witnessed in that 60-second speech that shook the world. One man stood there, and he didn't need to fight for attention. He didn't need to argue, didn't need to push, didn't need to explain. He delivered a single sharp, undeniable truth, and the room fell silent. The world felt it, the headlines wrote it, and the lesson became clear. Sometimes the strongest move you can make is the one that is calm, concise, and confident. We live in a time where everyone is chasing attention. Social media rewards the loudest, the angriest, the most dramatic voices. We are taught, almost conditioned, to believe that to be heard, we must be noisy. We must rush to defend ourselves. We must grab people by the shoulders and shake them until they notice us. But what if real power doesn't work that way? What if true power is the ability to hold your ground without ever raising your tone? That 60-second speech was a masterclass in this principle. There was no shouting, no endless explanations, no long arguments, just a precise statement that carried the weight of unshakable confidence. And here's the thing, confidence feels different when it comes from a place of truth. It lands differently. It doesn't try to convince, it simply declares. That is why the world remembers it, because deep down we all recognize when someone is speaking from a place of certainty. Silence has a weight. It's like gravity in a room. When you speak less, every word you do speak carries more meaning, and precision is the arrow that makes those words impossible to ignore. Think about how that applies to your life. How many times have you tried to over-explain yourself to people who never believed in you in the first place? How often have you drained your energy defending your dreams, your choices, your worth to people who only wanted to doubt you? And did it ever really change anything? The truth is, the moment you stop chasing validation, your presence changes. The moment you decide that your worth doesn't need a debate, the world starts to feel it. This is what silence and precision teach us. It's not about saying nothing, it's about saying only what matters, with the kind of calm that makes people lean in instead of look away. There is something magnetic about a person who doesn't get pulled into the noise. We've all seen it. In a meeting, in a family discussion, in a moment of crisis, everyone is talking, shouting, trying to fill the air. And then that one person speaks, clear and measured. You feel the room shift. That is not luck. That is mastery of presence. That is the discipline to know that your voice doesn't have to compete. Your voice is already enough. When Jaishankar delivered that 60-second message, he wasn't just speaking for a nation. He was embodying this timeless truth. He didn't speak to defend. He didn't speak to please. He spoke to declare. And in that moment, silence became his ally. The power of precision became his armor. The entire world felt the impact. Because when you speak from stillness and certainty, the noise around you becomes irrelevant. This is a lesson that reaches beyond politics or diplomacy. It's a lesson for anyone who has ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or dismissed. You don't have to fight for your space by being the loudest voice. You create your space by being the clearest. You claim your respect by standing so firm in your truth that the world cannot move you. There is a quiet kind of confidence that cannot be ignored, and that's what this moment showed us. In just 60 seconds, a single statement carried the weight of decades of change. It didn't argue, it didn't beg, it didn't justify, it simply existed, powerful and undeniable. That's the power of silence and precision. It doesn't just make people hear you, it makes them feel you, and once they feel you, they never forget. There is a certain fire that comes from being underestimated. If you've ever walked into a room where people had already decided who you were, what you could do, or how much you mattered, you know that feeling. It burns quietly. It's the sting of being seen, but not really seen. And for years, that's exactly how the world treated India. Present, visible, but underestimated. Decisions were made as if its voice was background noise, as if its presence didn't carry the weight it deserved. But here's the thing about being underestimated. If you carry yourself with patience, clarity, and purpose, the day will come when the same people who ignored you will have no choice but to listen. That is exactly what that 60-second speech represented. It was not born out of sudden luck. It was the product of years of silent strength, years of preparation, and years of letting the world think you were quiet until the right moment arrived to show that quiet doesn't mean weak. When Jaishankar delivered that short, razor-sharp statement, it didn't just land, it transformed perception. Suddenly, the world realized that the nation they once overlooked was not just part of the conversation, it was the conversation. Allies were inspired, critics were stunned, and those who once underestimated India had to reevaluate everything they thought they knew. I want you to hold on to that image because it mirrors life in so many ways. How many times have you felt overlooked in your own story? At work, in your family, in your community? How often have people dismissed your ideas, doubted your abilities, or treated you like you were always going to be in the background? It hurts, but there is a gift hidden inside that underestimation. Being underestimated gives you time. It gives you space to grow without the noise of constant expectation. It allows you to prepare your moment in silence. And when that moment arrives, when you finally step into your truth, the impact is even greater because no one saw it coming. That is the beauty of quiet transformation. In that 60-second speech, what the world saw as sudden was actually the result of a long, steady climb. It was a lifetime of strategy, discipline, and the decision to no longer seek permission to be respected. That is a message for every person who has ever felt small. Your influence is not built in the noise. It's built in the shadows, in the moments when no one is watching, in the quiet discipline of preparing for your breakthrough. And when the world finally turns to you, you don't need to scream, because your presence speaks louder than any argument ever could. That's how underestimation transforms into influence. You take the doubt, the silence, the dismissal, and you let it sharpen you instead of break you. You let it prepare you instead of stop you. I think about so many people who spend their lives trying to convince the world of their worth. They beg for attention, for validation, for someone to notice. But what this moment shows us is that influence is not taken, it is earned. It is earned in the quiet commitment to yourself, the unshakable knowing that even if no one sees you right now, you are still preparing for the day they cannot look away. There is a line that moment drew across the global stage, before and after. Before that speech, there was doubt, dismissal, underestimation. After that speech, there was respect. That transformation wasn't an accident. It was the direct result of refusing to be defined by how others see you. It's the same choice you have in your life. The world may not always recognize your power immediately. People might ignore you, misunderstand you, or underestimate you. But your influence is not dependent on their recognition. Your influence comes from how you carry yourself when no one is watching, and how you rise when the moment arrives. Being underestimated is a strange gift. It lets you move silently, it lets you prepare deeply, and it allows your breakthrough to be undeniable. When that speech was delivered, the world didn't just hear words, they felt years of resilience behind them. They felt a nation that had grown strong while the world wasn't paying attention. They felt influence that didn't need to be demanded. It simply arrived and it could not be denied. So if you're in a season where you feel overlooked or underestimated, remember this: your moment is coming. Every quiet effort, every uncelebrated step, every ignored contribution, it's all building something bigger than you can see right now. One day, the same people who doubted you will have no choice but to feel the weight of who you are. That is the moment when underestimation turns into influence. Confidence is a language that doesn't need volume. It doesn't need to fight to be heard, and it certainly doesn't need to shout to prove itself. True confidence carries a quiet energy, a presence that speaks even before you open your mouth. And when I think about that 60-second moment that stunned the world, what I saw wasn't just a statement, it was confidence, pure and unshaken, standing in its own truth without raising its voice. There's a certain kind of calm that only comes from knowing who you are. Not hoping, not wishing, not trying to convince anyone, but knowing. And when you know, your words carry weight without ever needing to be loud. That's exactly what happened that day. The room was filled with the most powerful voices on the planet, voices that were used to debating, defending, and dominating. But in just 60 seconds, one voice, steady, even, and measured, cut through all of it. Not because it was the loudest, but because it was the most certain. We live in a world that often mistakes noise for strength. We're surrounded by people competing for attention, rushing to fill silence with words, believing that power is in how much space they can take up. But what if I told you that real power doesn't need to chase space because it owns the space it walks into? That is what confidence without shouting looks like. It doesn't seek approval. It doesn't beg for permission. It simply arrives and says, "Here I am," and the room shifts around it. Think about your own life. How many times have you felt like you had to talk over someone to be taken seriously? How often have you raised your voice or repeated yourself, hoping that if you were just loud enough, people would finally understand you? But here's the truth. Volume doesn't always equal influence. Sometimes the more we try to force people to see our worth, the more it slips through our fingers. Real confidence is not about forcing anyone to listen. It's about speaking with such clarity and calm that they can't look away. When Jaishankar delivered that 60-second speech, he didn't just speak for a country. He embodied the art of confidence without shouting. There was no aggression in his tone, no desperation in his words, no performance in his delivery. It was a calm declaration, and that calm was louder than any shout could ever be. Because when confidence is real, it doesn't have to announce itself, it is felt. There's a magnetic quality to someone who knows their power but doesn't flaunt it. It draws people in, it commands respect without ever demanding it. And that is the kind of presence that changes rooms, careers, and lives. This moment was a reminder that the world listens differently when you're not trying to be heard. You simply are heard because what you carry within you is undeniable. I want you to imagine the ripple effect of that moment. In boardrooms, classrooms, homes, and hallways across the world, there are people like you and me who have been made to feel small, made to feel like we need to push harder, speak louder, or prove more just to be seen. But what if we all learned this one lesson? That confidence is not in the performance, it's in the presence. It's not in the volume, it's in the value. The 60-second speech wasn't loud, but it was unforgettable. And that's the lesson for all of us. You don't have to fight for attention when your truth is strong enough to stand on its own. You don't have to explain yourself to everyone who doubts you. You don't have to convince the world of your worth by raising your voice. You only need to speak with the kind of clarity that comes from deep self-belief. Confidence without shouting is like still water. It looks calm on the surface, but it is powerful, steady, and unshakable beneath. It doesn't react to every wave around it because it knows its depth. And when you live like that, the world feels it. There is a kind of freedom in letting go of the need to be loud. When you stop performing for others and start living in your own truth, your presence alone is enough. And that's when everything changes. The right people will listen. The right opportunities will find you. The world will begin to respond, not because you demanded it, but because your quiet confidence cannot be ignored. In that 60-second moment, we didn't just witness a diplomatic statement. We witnessed the power of owning your voice fully, of knowing that the world doesn't need you to shout. It needs you to speak from the deepest part of your truth with the kind of confidence that no one can shake. And when you find that within yourself, you don't just speak, you resonate. And resonance lasts longer than volume ever could. Diplomacy is often seen as something that happens in grand halls, under glittering chandeliers, between leaders in tailored suits speaking in careful, rehearsed phrases. But the truth is, diplomacy isn't only for world leaders. Diplomacy is the way you carry yourself in the world. It's the way you respond when someone underestimates you, the way you stand firm without losing your calm, and the way you turn every interaction into an opportunity to shape how others see you. In that 60-second speech that stunned the world, we didn't just see international diplomacy, we saw the purest example of personal power in action. When Jaishankar spoke, he wasn't simply addressing global leaders. He was showing all of us that the principles of strong diplomacy are the same principles that can transform our own lives. He didn't argue, he didn't attack, he didn't try to win through volume or emotion. Instead, he embodied calm authority. He stood with an unshakable presence and let his words carry the weight of truth. That is exactly what personal power looks like. So many of us live our lives in reaction mode. Someone doubts us and we rush to defend ourselves. Someone criticizes us and we get angry or try to explain our worth. Someone challenges us and we feel like we have to push harder just to prove that we belong. But true personal power doesn't operate from reaction. It operates from alignment. It knows who it is and doesn't need to beg for recognition. And that's what diplomacy in its purest form is, the art of influence without the need for force. I want you to think about your own life for a moment. Where are the places where you've been giving away your power? Maybe it's in your workplace where you feel like no one listens unless you talk louder, work harder, or compromise your peace. Maybe it's in your relationships where you keep explaining yourself to people who aren't willing to see you. Maybe it's in the quiet corners of your dreams where you hesitate to move forward because the world hasn't validated you yet. The lesson in that 60-second speech is simple. Stop explaining, start embodying. Stop seeking approval, start owning your presence. The moment you decide that your truth doesn't need to be defended, your life begins to change. That is diplomacy as personal power. It is the ability to hold your ground with grace, to communicate with clarity, and to leave no doubt in anyone's mind, not because you forced them to see your worth, but because your worth was undeniable. When a nation steps into this kind of confidence, the world takes notice, and when you step into it, your life takes notice. Opportunities begin to find you. Respect begins to follow you. Even the people who doubted you start to feel your presence differently, not because you shouted over them, but because you became so rooted in who you are that no one can move you. The power of diplomacy is that it never wastes energy on battles that don't matter. It saves its strength for the moments that count. It doesn't explode with emotion, it moves with intention, and that is exactly how we should live. Too often we exhaust ourselves trying to fight every criticism, chase every opportunity, or prove ourselves to people who have already made up their minds. But if you want true influence, you have to learn the art of holding your energy until the moment it matters, and then delivering your truth with such precision that no one can deny it. That 60-second speech was an example of this art. It was a single arrow, perfectly aimed, that shifted the conversation of the entire world. And in your own life, you can do the same. Maybe your stage is not the global arena, but it doesn't have to be. Your stage is every room you walk into, every meeting, every conversation, every moment when life asks, "Who are you?" And you answer, not with noise, but with presence. Diplomacy is not weakness. It is strength dressed in calm. It is the ability to stay composed when others lose their balance. It is the confidence to know that you don't have to meet chaos with chaos, and you don't have to match noise with noise. When you embody that in your own life, you stop chasing respect and start commanding it. So if you take nothing else from that 60-second moment, take this. Your life is your stage, and your power comes from how you show up on it. Not from shouting, not from defending, but from speaking with the kind of quiet certainty that moves the room without ever raising your voice. That is how diplomacy transforms into personal power. And once you learn to carry that within you, you'll never have to ask for respect again. It will follow you wherever you go. Your voice is more than just sound. It is energy. It is presence. It is the living reflection of who you are and what you stand for. And yet, so many of us go through life doubting it, silencing it, or handing it over to the opinions of others. We speak, but we hesitate. We share, but we shrink. We let fear of judgment dilute our truth until our voice barely feels like our own anymore. But that 60-second speech that shook the world was a reminder. Your voice is your power, and when you own it fully, you don't just speak, you transform the space around you. When Jaishankar delivered those words, he wasn't just representing a country, he was representing the idea that a voice rooted in clarity and conviction cannot be ignored. He didn't need to debate or defend, he didn't speak to please, he spoke to declare. And that declaration carried the weight of history, dignity, and unshakable self-belief. That is the power your voice can hold when it comes from a place of truth. So many of us have been conditioned to think that our voice only matters if someone else validates it. We wait for permission. We wait for the right time. We wait until we feel perfectly ready. But the truth is, your voice has been powerful from the moment you chose to use it with intention. The world doesn't need you to be perfect. It needs you to be present. I want you to think about how many times you've held back from saying what you really felt. How many times you stayed quiet because you were afraid of being judged, rejected, or misunderstood. And yet deep down there was a voice in you waiting, asking to be heard. That's the same voice that can change the direction of your life the moment you decide to honor it. Your voice is not just about speaking, it's about alignment. When your words match your heart and your heart aligns with your actions, people feel it. They may not always agree, but they will feel your authenticity. And authenticity is magnetic. It pulls the right people, the right opportunities, and the right respect toward you. That 60-second speech worked because it was aligned. It was brief, but it carried decades of meaning. It was calm, but it held the fire of a nation that had decided it would no longer be underestimated. When your voice carries that kind of alignment, you don't need to over-explain. You don't need to convince. You simply speak, and the room shifts. Think about the power that gives you in your own life. Your voice can change your relationships. It can shift the direction of your career. It can set boundaries, create opportunities, and inspire others who never believed they could rise. But you only unlock that power when you trust it, when you stop letting fear control the volume or the message. Too often we trade our voice for comfort. We stay silent to avoid conflict. We agree to things that don't serve us, and we pretend to be smaller than we are just to fit into spaces that were never meant for us. But silence, when it comes from fear, takes your power away. Silence, when it comes from alignment, amplifies it. That is the difference. The speech that shook the world was powerful, not because of its length, but because of its weight. It was a voice that didn't flinch, didn't waver, and didn't apologize for existing. That is the kind of voice you carry inside you. It's the voice that says, this is who I am, this is what I stand for, and I will not shrink to make you comfortable. Your voice is not meant to blend into the noise. It's meant to rise above it, not with volume, but with truth. And once you decide to use it that way, everything in your life begins to change. The opportunities you've been waiting for start to appear. The respect you've been chasing starts to follow you. The people who are meant to walk with you on your path will recognize you, not because you shouted for their attention, but because your authentic voice called to them without needing permission. There will always be people who doubt you. There will always be moments when the world seems louder than your belief in yourself. But the voice inside you, the one that knows your truth, is your anchor. When you speak from that place, the world listens differently. And in that moment, your voice becomes not just sound, but power. That is the lesson in that 60-second moment that stunned the globe. Your voice can change narratives. Your voice can command respect. Your voice can be the spark that transforms silence into strength. And once you embrace that, you'll never wonder if the world will listen, because the world can't ignore a voice that is this alive, this aligned, and this unshakable.